Humans have a love-hate relationship with change. We need it for growth and variety, and yet we hate the upheaval it brings into our lives. Resilience seems to be the answer. So let's explore a new kind of conversation where we look at the turbulence of change and the resilience that enables us to not only survive it, but to truly thrive from it. I'm Paula Shaw, life transition expert, grief counseling specialist, and author. I'll be spotlighting influential people on this podcast, people who have taken the steps to change it up. So join us as we share valuable information to help you navigate the rocky waters of change. Come on, jump on in. Hey, welcome to the show today. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and I'm really glad you're with me today because, as those of you know who've been following the show, we are talking this season about grief. The theme we're working with is a season of grief, and we're looking at grief from many different angles, different populations. We've looked at last week, foster children. The first show we talked at kind of a master class of just what is grief? What do we do with it? What are things that are effective in helping us work with it? And what are things that are not? We've talked with Gary Plummer, NFL football player, about the grief he went through after retiring from the game and dealing with his concussion injuries from so many years in the game. And today we're going to be looking at a certain population near and dear to our hearts, particularly all us women, and that's men, but particularly the warriors. Men who are in hard driving professions like NFL football players and Navy SEALs. And my guest today knows a lot about why grief is difficult for men. I mean, let's think about it, ladies. We grow up with just this mentality of, hey, let's get together and chat. Let's get together and just hang and talk. But men usually get together to do something, to go to a game or to play a round of golf or that sort of thing. And our society is just not really very fair to men in that they don't get permission to just cry openly when they're sad or when they're hurting. They're encouraged to be strong. You got to be tough. I remember one of the things Gary Plummer shared with us from all his years with the Chargers and the 49ers. He said, you got hurt. It was sort of like just dust it off, throw a little dirt on it and get back in the game. In a way, that's kind of a metaphor for how men are taught in our whole society, at least here in the US. And that makes it really difficult for them because now when they're feeling pain, and by the way, they feel pain just as deeply as we do, but they're just not allowed to sob or get hysterical or break down when they're feeling that pain. And that creates a real complication because, as I've shared with you in the past, stuffing our grief is never a good idea. Obviously, we can't break down in the board meeting or, we can't walk around campus crying all day. There are times when we have to try to control our emotions so that we can get through something we have to do. But on the whole, the best way for people to work through grief is by expressing it as honestly and authentically as they can. But we don't really give that permission to the guys in our society here. But my guest today, Jeff Ginsburger, he knows how to do that with men. He has worked with some of the most difficult populations, NFL football players and Navy SEALs. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeff and let me get him out here so he can share with us all these incredible things he's doing in his work with these warriors in our society. His true desire is helping men reach their full potential. He received his Master's of Ministry from Bethel Seminary, and during his tenure, he served as one of the chaplains for the San Diego Chargers, excuse me, in addition to working with Navy SEALs, helping them all win in the game of life. After the Chargers abandoned us, I have to say, I'm a San Diego girl, I can't help it. After they went to Los Angeles, Jeff stayed and he started what is known today as Reset Ministries. And his focus is to step into the fight and lead men through the best and worst that life has to throw at them. So without keeping you waiting any longer, I really want to introduce you to Jeff Ginsburger. Jeff, hi there.
Hello. Hey, how you doing, Paula?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And thank you for joining me. Jeff is joining us from, was it Alabama, you said, Jeff?
Yeah, sweet home, Alabama. Yes, I am in Birmingham as we speak. Birmingham, Alabama.
Birmingham. And what are you doing there, Jeff?
I was very fortunate, but over the years of being in ministry and working with athletes and sports, the United States Football League kicks off season 2 this weekend. And so I am basically spearheading a spiritual development plan for the league and providing a chaplain for every team so that we can help these guys who want to hold on to the dream and still play football at a very high level, navigate through life as well. So that's why I'm here.
Fabulous. So that actually leads me to my next question. How did you begin in this kind of work? What's the backstory on Jeff Ginsburger?
Well, it's a great question. I initially am from St. Louis, Missouri. Born, most people in California, when they meet me, they're like, "You're not from here." I'm like, "I am not." But yeah, born and raised in St. Louis. Went to a very small school in Kansas. I went to Pittsburgh State University. And when people think, "Oh, it's on the East Coast," it's actually in a very small town in Kansas. And so kind of like Miami of Ohio, this is Pittsburgh, Kansas. Met a gentleman there when he was a senior and I was a freshman, a young lad, as they say, fresh off the boat. And he's like, "Hey, I'm moving to San Diego. Do you want to come with me?" And I'm like, "Kansas, California, let's go."
And, tough decision.
Very tough. So made my way to San Diego at the ripe age of 19 years old and pretty much have been out there ever since.
Wow. Well, I think that's a good decision. Being a San Diegan myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't start here either, but I'm sure glad I am here.
Correct.
It's a great place to be. Well, and I'm so glad that you did come to this area. But how did you end up becoming a chaplain for the Chargers and now going on to become a chaplain in this new football league?
That's a great question. So when I first moved to San Diego, the gentleman that I moved with, his name was Doug Hicks. Doug was a great athlete himself. And so he started a training business. And so we were very close. He's kind of like an older brother to me. And so I kind of just fell into training. And a lot of the guys that we were working with were current Charger players. And one of the first guys that we ever trained, his name was Terrell Fletcher. He used to play for the Chargers. Long after Terrell's career, he ended up becoming a pastor. And NFL is it's a great business, but it also stands for not for long. And when the Chargers fired Norv Turner and brought in a new coach, they basically cleaned house. And Terrell was kind of the head chaplain that they brought in, but he was a really good friend of mine and needed some help. And so I kind of was the assistant chaplain, I guess you can say, and just was able to spend a lot of time with those guys and ended up basically becoming one of the chaplains as well, and was very fortunate, but got to travel with the team, really built some great relationships over the years. And so, but that's how initially I became a chaplain, was through Terrell.
Jeff, I wasn't even aware that teams had a chaplain. So what kind of duties do you have? What kinds of things are you helping the guys work with or work through?
It could be anything from relationships to life in general. Just really being there for guys when they go through injuries, when they go through just challenges in life, um, because they are literally the best of the best, and because of the platform that so many people give them, everybody's always looking for something from those guys. And so, as
Yeah.
a chaplain, I really just, my heart was like, look, I don't want anything from you. I'll never ask you for anything. I'm just here to love on you, to be an encouragement, to be a resource,
Mhm.
really just a safe place that those guys can trust. Because a lot of those guys really don't have safe places. And so I was very fortunate to just be in their corner when they needed someone to lean on that could be a safe place they could trust.
Wow, that's so great. So, do you work with people just as issues come up, or do they have regular time scheduled with you, or do you have a meeting with them every week? How does that work?
It's really both and. I mean,
Mm,
you're there in times of crisis, but you're there just to do life as well. So there would be many times before a game, we'd all go out, we'd all just go to dinner, they'd come over to the house. It really just depends, but it's
yeah,
both and, because really, as a chaplain, there's something what's called the ministry of presence, which means basically you're just there.
yeah,
You're there when they need you, and they're there when they don't, but they see you around. It's kind of like I heard somebody say one time, how do you spell love? And
mm.
it's Time. Time.
So that, what was the spelling again? Say it
T
nice.
Time.
Oh boy, too true. Too true.
Uh, and that's something I've learned from one of my mentors. Just really to really love these guys, you got to be there a lot.
Mhm.
That's how trust is built. So yeah, it was a lot of just doing life together, and
Yeah.
that could be anything from, like I said, going to grab coffee, having lunch, movies, to when then it's time to have the serious conversation. There's enough deposits in the relational bank that they trust you enough to go there.
That makes total sense. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I really want to know more about this because this is a whole new area of education for me that the teams provide this kind of help for the guys. So stick around, everybody. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Is living in today's fast-paced world making you feel stressed and out of balance? Are anxiety, sleeplessness, depression, lack of focus, or weight gain robbing you of your relationship and your energy? If you're ready for change, you need to call Paula Shaw. Paula helps you identify and eliminate self-sabotaging thinking and behavior. Using a wide variety of mind-body techniques, she provides her clients with the most effective processes for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio, everybody. So glad to have you with me. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and I am talking today with Jeff Ginsburger, who's the former chaplain of the San Diego Chargers and the head of Reset Ministries. He actually is also now one of the chaplains in the new United States Football League. So we'll have to ask him a little more about that. But one of the things that occurred to me, Jeff, as you were just talking about what your role was in terms of being a chaplain for the guys, these guys, for the most part, a lot of them are kids right out of college, right? They're young. They're
Yeah.
like 20,
Correct.
21, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking about here you are in an arena that's so glorified in this country,
Right.
that's so glamorized, but the pressure on these guys has got to be huge to be that young and not all that experienced in life and have this kind of pressure. How did you see that show up for them and what could you do for them?
Again, another great question. For a lot of these guys, and most people don't realize this, but the average career in the NFL is only 2.5 years.
Oh my God, really?
Um, Now, there are guys obviously who have made it a lot longer than that, but again, for the league as the NFL as a whole, the average career is only about 2.5 to 3 years. So a lot of these young guys come in and think, obviously, I've arrived, I've made it. Only
Mhm.
1% of athletes will ever become a professional athlete.
Mhm.
They think it's going to last forever. So for most of these guys, football is an identity, and it was for me too. I played 4 years of college football myself, and
Mhm.
didn't make it to the NFL, but as a player, should I say, but God always knew I would get there as a chaplain. But
Mhm.
for a lot of these guys, their whole life is based around one thing, and that's football.
Right.
And so when that identity is taken away abruptly, it's very hard for a lot of guys, as you know, because you help a lot of people with transition as well. Identity is a big thing. And again, football is not who they are. That's just what they get to do. But trying to unlock that up
Mm.
for a lot of guys can be very challenging.
So I can see there are challenges when you're playing the game, and it must be really challenging if you get hurt or suddenly you can't play the game. As a matter of fact, I'm a member of the NFL Alumni Club.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, I've got a little throat thing this morning. And so all the guys in that group are former players. And hearing the stories of how do you go from being this highly trained warrior to selling cars or being an insurance salesman or trying to work for somebody else in a corporation. It's a huge adjustment for these guys, isn't it?
Major adjustment. And, you talk about Warriors. I've been very fortunate as well to work, being in San Diego, close to Coronado, and working with, some military, Navy SEALs there. Um,
Mhm.
those guys are literally the 1% of the world. So they're the best of the best. And more times than not, the game is done with them before they are done with the game.
Oh,
So
say that again, Jeff. That was so right on. Say it again.
generally, more times than not, most guys, they keep playing football as long as they can.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Tom Brady was one of the exceptions to the rules. 45, right? But
Right.
most guys, whether it's an injury or a team just makes a business decision, they get cut, and it can happen that fast where the game is done with them before they are ready to be done with the game. They
Mm.
want to keep playing, but the game's like, sorry, you've been replaced.
And
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish your
no, no,
point.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I always talk about grief as the normal, natural response to loss. And what you're describing is a loss on so many levels: loss of your identity, loss of your income, loss of the position you were in, loss of the fame. It's huge. There's so many different losses on that level.
Absolutely. And whether you're an NFL athlete, a Navy SEAL, or just a regular guy like myself, that can be hard for anybody.
Mm.
Um, you have structure every day, you have purpose every day, you have a built-in family that you've literally, and I mean, for some of those military guys, it's the blood, sweat, and tears literally that you've shed with some of these guys, and then to have that drastically taken away, it's, well, what do I do next? Where do I go?
Exactly.
How do I navigate that? I have a playbook for the game, but I don't have a playbook for this. And
Yeah.
that's where a lot of guys get in trouble, because there is no playbook. And again, with a lot of things that you deal with, guilt and shame can be a big deal, because as men, we're told you're really only a real man if you're successful. I like, Joe Ehrman. He has this thing. He was a former NFL player, and he has this thing, how to love and be loved.
Hmm.
Joe would always say, and he, grew up in the 60s, and, his dad, but most men are taught you're only a real man if you're successful in the billfold or in the wallet. If you really make a lot of money in, the bedroom, oh, you got to get a lot of women, or
Hmm.
on the ball court or on the field. Like, if you're successful in those three areas, then you're really a man.
Wow.
When that is taken away, or you make a mistake, or you don't make it, your whole world is turned upside down, because now what the world would tell you is you're not successful. And well, where do I go with the grief of that? How do I deal with that in a healthy way? And the answer is most guys, unfortunately, don't.
Exactly. And, I think especially in these populations you're working with, they're taught to put self second, be in the order of, what do you prioritize? You prioritize the mission, whether the mission is running a touchdown or the mission is doing something in the military. You're supposed to prioritize that over yourself. And now, in order to process grief, you've got to go into yourself. You've got to prioritize yourself enough to feel you have a right to express the feelings, feel the feelings, and maybe get help from somebody like you or me.
Right. And we're not really ever taught how to do that.
Yeah.
We don't know what that looks like practically. And a lot of guys feel like, oh, well, I'm weak if I do that. I'm not really a, man if I reach out for help. And so, you know what? I know this one area of my life, kind of sucks right now, but I'm a man. I'll figure it out, because I'm a
Right.
self and I need help. That's weakness.
Mhm.
And what everybody learns at some point is really, it's not until something goes boom, where it's out of your control, that then you're forced to ask for help.
Yes. And when you get to that point, sometimes it's so huge that, even with help, boy, you've got a big, huge mountain to climb to get yourself to a place of healing.
Correct.
So I think especially, and I really feel like, even though we're focusing on SEALs and NFL players, don't you think these issues are pretty common for all men?
If you're a man, it's like, a friend of mine was in real estate, and back in the day when things were booming, it's like, what was the qualification? And it's like, if you can fog a mirror, you're qualified. Um, if you're, no one gets a free pass from these, this,
Yes.
or a woman for that matter. Unfortunately, we live in this world, and there's a lot of unfortunate things that happen in this world. And, it doesn't matter who you are, where you were born, how much money you make, your socioeconomic position, everybody has to face these issues in this game of life at some point.
Mhm. So, I'm thinking, Jeff, if one of our listeners knows a guy, and maybe he's a plumber, or maybe he is an insurance salesman, but he's dealing with these kind of issues we're talking about, what would you suggest to them? What would be like a step one in trying to
Oh, step one, and it's, and I always say the front door is always the heaviest door.
help?
Step one can always be the hardest.
Yeah.
And it does take a lot of courage, because to be vulnerable with somebody else, for guys specifically,
Mhm.
it can really be a very scary thing.
Yes.
If you're just, again, if you're a man and you're out there and you're listening and you're like, I know I need some help. And usually what I found is it's the guilt and shame that keeps us in what's been called the crazy cycle.
Mhm.
I'm on this crazy cycle, that these patterns keep repeating themselves, and things are spinning out of control, and I do not know how to get off.
Yes.
And it's like, well, how do I get out of the crazy cycle to go into the peace cycle or the joy cycle?
Mhm.
Really what I've learned, and step one, what if I would tell you, and we've talked about this, in the past, that if I could tell you my deepest, darkest thing that I've done, that I'm most ashamed of,
Mhm.
and by telling you that, I would be more loved.
Mhm.
It's a interesting thought, because most people think the opposite.
Totally. And
It's a
fear the opposite,
Well,
right?
that's what keeps guys in that cycle, is fear.
Yeah.
Because I really told somebody what happened, or if someone really knew who I was,
Right.
they don't love me anymore. And it's
Exactly.
a beautiful thing to be loved and to be fully known. So in answer to your question, my encouragement would be find someone that you trust. You don't have to talk to 20 people. Find one person.
Yeah.
And really, the first step is letting go so there are no more secrets in the closet, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. Love
When
that.
there are no more secrets, nothing's hidden. I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to try to cover behaviors that or patterns that I keep going back to that I want to break and I don't know how. That's because it's still that it has power over you. It's in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone that you trust, someone that loves you just for who you are, and even if it's just one person that you call, and when you call that person, they're excited to hear from you.
Yes.
They actually enjoy talking to you. When you can share some deep, dark things with that person, it's almost like just this massive weight off your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
You've been carrying sometimes for 5, 10. I mean, I've worked with guys that have been carrying things since a little boy.
Wow.
And
Yes.
when they finally get to that place where they feel safe enough, it's life-changing.
Truly, truly. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And then I want to share a story with you about a similar situation I had in Al-Anon. We'll be right back. Paula Shaw here. I'm thrilled that LifeWave phototherapy patches, which use no drugs or chemicals, have become a part of my life and my business. My family and I all use their wearable patch technology, and the results are life-changing. My parents in their 90s used the X39 patch, which activates stem cells, reverses aging, and improves the function of every area of the brain. I love X39 because I can work out with a 30-year-old with no problem. And it's erased my fine lines and given my skin a youthful glow. LifeWave patches use a patented form of phototherapy, frequencies of light, to safely boost health and wellness at the cellular level. No drugs. To learn more, go to my website, lifewave.com/safe health. That's lifewave.com/safe health. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and my guest today is Jeff Ginsburger, former chaplain of the San Diego Chargers and a man who has done some fabulous and interesting work with NFL football players and Navy SEALs in helping these men who can have such a difficult time accessing their feelings and their sadness and their hurt. Jeff helps them get to the other side and win in the game of life. So Jeff was just sharing with us that one of the biggest problems for men is getting past the guilt and the shame that they're hurting, that they feel inept or dysfunctional in their own lives. And, you know, I think that guilt and shame thing, Jeff, is so universal, both men and women. That's what blocks us from getting the help we need. And I remember a time I was in Al-Anon for many years because my husband was a recovering alcoholic. And one of the women shared a story that I thought was so right on the money. And she was saying, we all walk into these rooms so laden with our guilt and our shame over the things we've done or the things we've allowed to happen. And you finally get up your courage and you share your horrible, ugly, terrible story that you've been hiding all these years. And everybody just goes, and so? You know, and it's kind of like, we love you. Good for you. You did that. It's just like you were saying, if you could have that safe place, because in the Al-Anon room, we all knew we had awful stories like that. So nobody was judging anybody else. And I think that's probably very true in all of life. We all have our little dark secrets. You know, we all have those things we don't feel great about. But if we can just let other people know that we're so in awe of the courage they had to share their story, we only love them more. If we could all come from that, wow, what a safe place we'd create for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And really a lot of, and what my passion and what drives me is just dealing with the hearts of people.
Yeah.
So few
Yes.
ever really get to the heart. And for most, and I was one of them for a very long time. And when I'm sitting down with guys or I'm counseling a couple, I'm like, just so
Mm.
you know, I lived in the master suite of the club for most of my life. So welcome. Operators
Yes.
are by. It's like, um, but just letting them know that, because so many people, I think, at times have this shock of like, oh, you did what? And I'm like,
Mm.
look, there's nothing that you're going to tell me, and I don't care what it is. There's
Yes.
nothing you're going to tell me that is going to make me love you any less.
Mm.
And
That
that's
is
really
beautiful.
what my heart is now. Is I don't care what the situation is, because really I've learned there is never such a thing as a hopeless situation.
Mhm.
But sometimes people do give up hope. And
Very
really,
true. Very true.
again, like when America needs some help, again, they call the best of the best. They call
Mhm.
SEAL teams.
Mhm.
They train every day to go do things that most people won't or can't.
Mhm.
And for me now, when I get a call, I don't care what darkness I'm stepping into, or in a sense, what in theory, bullets are flying my way. We're when we get the call, we're coming, and
Yeah.
it's literally. And because here's the thing, I can't save it, but I can lead you on a journey out.
Mm.
I think that's the thing with most people, is that they just, oh, this just must be the way it is. This is my lot in life. I guess this is the cards
Yes.
I dealt. And really, a lot of what I get to do now is helping people just connect the dots, to have the self awareness to say, oh, that's why I was doing that. And
Yes.
instead of getting off at this exit, you know what? I don't have to get off here. I can get off at the next exit, which is a
Yeah.
much better exit than what I've been getting off at. So it's um, I'm very fortunate to get to do the kind of work that I get to do and help the people I get to help.
That's so right on the money. I think it's really true of people who do the kind of work you and I both do. We
Right.
don't heal anybody. We don't fix anybody,
Yeah.
but we get to be guides that can, show some new pathways or new possibilities so that the people themselves can look inside themselves and see, ooh, does that feel better? And then do the work to do that healing. It's not us.
No, absolutely. And let's just be honest. We both know this. Change is hard.
Oh,
Change is,
amen.
it's like, oh, how long did it take for us that are married to figure out I can't change my spouse,
Yes,
or
exactly.
not the same person I married. Well, it's like, well, guess what? Neither are you. So,
And
uh,
that brings me actually to my next area of questioning. I know, Jeff, when you're working with guys, whether it's SEALs or football players or whatever, who have relationships, sometimes you actually then work with the couple because that's part of the situation, right?
yes, yeah, yes, generally more times than not when dealing with. You look at some of the divorce rates, whether it's in the military or even in professional sports, it's very high, very high. And so I've been able to help a lot of couples over the years get to the very root of what some of the issues are, because most
Mhm.
people just, let's just cut it off at the top, but it keeps growing. But it's really, let's get to the root of the issue. um, and being able to do that has been awesome to see couples that normally would be a statistic
Yeah.
win in their marriage.
What do you find are the most common kind of issues that people like? I mean, I know with football players, you're dealing with fame, you're dealing with pressure, you're dealing with prioritizing a game. SEALs are dealing with the mission, their training, all the things that they have to put first. What shows up in the relationship that you see as the most problematic kinds of things?
There's a lot of things. More times than not, generally it's trust. I hear a lot, oh, well, I don't feel quote unquote safe, or you're not a safe place.
Mm.
Not all the time, but there can be infidelity that
Mhm.
sometimes shows up, because again, a lot of these guys are gone a lot. And
Yes.
so, um, and sometimes it's the lies that both sides believe.
Ah.
Uh, people judge us by our actions, not our intentions. And so we can be great, kind-hearted people, and I can say I love you all the time, but love to me is more of an action than a feeling. And so
Mhm.
those are some of the few that generally tend to show up.
I would think as a woman, first of all, you're dealing with, yes, in both situations, the men are out of town a lot. They're going other places to do their jobs. So that's a little scary. You have to have a certain level of security and safety to know that
Of
while
course.
that man's away, he's still being faithful to you. But I would also think there's some issues unless a woman is very secure in who she is herself, or in her career, or in her role as a mom, or whatever she's doing. Here's this man with this very big job in both of those situations. Either it's a big military mission, or it's a game that millions of people may be watching. So I would imagine it's hard on the women to feel enough, or to feel that they are as important in a way in the relationship. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And really, when you get into a marriage, it's one of the most intimate relationships
Right.
we will ever experience. And as we've talked about in the past, and as I've learned, most people don't have marriage problems. Marriage problems are, oh, put the lid down, or hey, put the toothpaste, put the cat back. Those are marriage problems. But generally, most people have single problems that they've never dealt with that they are now bringing into the marriage
Yes.
that shows up immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Even on the honeymoon, it's like, wait, what is this? I didn't. Is it already over? Like, hey, this was supposed to be the most. And honestly, for a lot of people, they've let Hollywood write the script of what they thought marriage should look like.
Yes.
And it's
Oh, so true.
not anything but. And so I tell people all the time, when you say I do, and on the other side, at some point, you will find yourself in a place saying, wow, I never signed up for this. I never thought I'd be here. This is not the same person I married.
Yes.
And insecurities show up, to your point,
Mhm.
almost instantly, because now you're in a covenant. And, when I say for better or worse, or till death do us part, what part of that did I not understand? And so
Yeah.
now, unless it's, there is infidelity, or, there are other things, obviously. But, when most people are like, oh, we fell out of love.
Yeah.
Well, okay, sounds good. But, um, it's like, okay, there's a lot of things that play a factor in that. And insecurities is a major one for sure.
I think so. Absolutely. And, I truly believe in all the couples that I have worked with over the years. At the base of it always seems to be communication.
Yeah.
I've never gotten over the immense impact of words unspoken. And I've also
Sure.
never gotten over the immense impact of words spoken.
Yeah.
So to learn how to speak to each other in a loving, respectful way, in a calm, loving, respectful way, is so important for people to succeed in relationships. And we don't get that training in life before we say, I do.
No, 1,000%. And sorry, not to cut you off there, but
No, please go ahead.
there's a great quote out there that says, life and death are in the power of the tongue.
Oh, that's very good. That's
So
very good.
literally, you're either going to speak life over your marriage, or you're going to speak destruction and death.
Yes.
And we don't realize the power that words have. And when we get in a fight or we get angry, and a lot of times we act out of our anger, we can say things that sometimes, the ramifications and consequences of those words last years down the road.
It's so true. And, on the one hand, I'm very big on encouraging people to express their feelings. But when it's anger or when it's that kind of upheaval and those disruptive emotions, then it's not okay to kick the dog, and it's not okay to scream at your partner. It's not okay to put your fist through the wall. Go take a run, or get yourself a kickboxing bag, or take a bike ride, or do something to bring the energy to a reasonable level so that then the communication can begin in a non-destructive way.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that is having right expectations.
Yeah.
When you think about what in a marriage a wife or a husband needs the most, and generally a woman wants to be loved and a man wants to be respected.
Yes.
And when neither feel either of those, that's when a lot of problems can occur and things go south real quick.
Real quick. Yes.
Generally, I've learned over the years, when a woman is being very disrespectful, even though it comes across that way, it's just a deeper cry to want to be loved.
Yes.
And it's really hard for a lot of guys in that moment because we're very reactionary. And if we feel like someone's coming at us, we're, gloves on, fisticuffs, like, let's go.
That's right.
Generally, okay, there's and it doesn't, look, this does not happen overnight. It takes a lot of practice and time, but generally over the years, if that cycle continues, it's almost like, the car on the dashboard going off.
Yeah.
Because whatever she's upset about or whatever you're fighting about, there's something under the hood that needs to get dealt with. And that's just the light on the dashboard for something below. And like you said, most people, we both know anger is a secondary emotion. Right. And when people are angry and they respond out of anger, they don't even know why sometimes. But it's so secondary that's just how they've always reacted. Again, we've talked about this, but a lot of times we're known by what we practice, whether that's love, whether that's patience, whether that's kindness, or on the flip side, it can be anger. It can be but you are known by what you practice.
Yes.
So if you really want a great litmus test tonight, go home and ask your spouse, hey, in our marriage, what do you think that I'm most known by, or what do you feel most by me?
Oh, I love that, Jeff. And on that note, we're going to have to pause for a minute for a quick break, but then we'll come back and explore that some more. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
For those looking to improve their lives, there's nobody better to turn to than Paula Shaw. Paula helps people regain successful lives by identifying and eliminating self-sabotaging behavior using a multitude of mind-body techniques to identify and resolve their core issues. Working with a wide variety of healing modalities, she provides her clients with the most effective process for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and I'm here with Jeff Ginsburger today, former chaplain of the San Diego Chargers, current chaplain in the new United States Football League, and also the head of Reset Ministries. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that as well, Jeff, because you're working today. I love that our focus was on the difficulties men face in expressing their feelings, in expressing the manifestations of grief, and how our society sets them up to make that difficult. But you also work with other people besides SEALs and NFL people through this amazing work called Reset Ministries. And so one of the things, first of all, I want to ask you is, like working with Chargers, working with SEALs, all of that, do people have to be religious or of a certain religion to work with you?
Absolutely not. I mean, I never, again, I work with all kinds of people, sometimes of all kinds of different faiths. I am, a faith-based man myself, and but I will never turn anyone away because there's always a connection point we can find, and
Mhm.
anything I can do to help. That's what I'm here to do. So it's kind of like fire, aim, ready. You call, work. But
Yes.
absolutely not. You do not have to be, a certain faith or certain anything. We work with all kinds of people and help.
Mhm. So what do you think are some of the tools or processes that are most helpful, particularly in dealing with men, but when people are grieving or when they're sad? And what I love about you, and I've heard you speak as well as had my own conversations with you, you do come from a very universal kind of perspective. And one of the things I remember hearing you talk about is that when we're caught up in the pain and the anxiety and the fear and in the hard parts of life and trying to get over that river of life to the other side, what are the things that you feel can help us most?
There's a lot of things, but a few things that come to mind. In what you're referring to, there's this thing called, the river of life.
Hmm.
This river, there's pain, there's heartache, there's hardship, there's trials. I learned this from a friend of mine, Wayman Howard, who he has his own ministry and has done some really good work. But unfortunately, again, in this life, there's a lot of things that will happen to us, and they're unavoidable. Pain, hardship, no one escapes those. And a lot of times when we face those, we go back or we revert back to some of those unhealthy behaviors
Hmm.
because we just want to numb the pain. And there are, I can imagine, just with some of your listeners and even your story, there's some real pain involved, and that's not fun. But one thing that I've learned is when you're in or experiencing that river,
Hmm.
or let's say you're in a relationship that's, you know, you're going through a rocky time, it's really trying to understand, okay, why am I reacting this way? Why am I getting so angry?
Yeah.
Almost like if you're going to light off a firework or you're going to, light a bomb, you have to light the wick first. So something has to be lit in order to go boom. And when something doesn't go the way we think it should, or we control it to the way and it goes the opposite, that's a lot of times when things happen. So I try to encourage people, and I'm like, the goal in this process, and again, it's not going to happen overnight, is how can we remove the wick? Because if there's nothing to light to
Right.
go boom,
Mhm.
we're going to be okay. And
Yeah.
so practically what that looks like, and I was just talking with somebody the other day, him and his wife, had what I call an intense fellowship. They were having some very choice words, and he got angry.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, let's unpack that. Let's talk about that. Well, why did you get angry? And long story short, I encouraged him in those moments. Your job, react and respond with patience and kindness.
Love that.
Because if you match her at a 10 with a 10, it's only going one place.
Exactly.
Um, and again, there's another great quote that says, "A soft answer turns away wrath."
Ah, I love that. That's really good. A soft
So
answer turns away wrath.
if I can learn to control my emotions, even when, let's just say, okay, you and your spouse get into a fight, or even with a coworker, or because again, I work with a lot of people, whether you're just a regular guy, I work with everyone, and I encourage, because and whether you're the best or you're just a general working man or woman, these principles anybody can and everybody needs to practice.
Yes.
So this particular gentleman, when his wife was reacting, disrespectfully. I'm like, well, maybe a better way could have been, what does patience look like in that situation?
Mhm.
If you were to respond out of kindness, well, she doesn't deserve it. Well, guess what? Neither do you. But because, and I always say, again, I think it was Dr. Emerson who wrote a book. He's like, well, how do I know who apologizes first? The bigger person,
Mm,
the more mature person.
beautiful.
Even if she's wrong and you're right, be the more mature and bigger person to say, you know what? Because where most people get stuck is pride. And if we can learn to humble ourselves
Mm,
and say, you know what, I'll be the bigger person. And even if this wasn't never my intention, but this is how, again, you talk about communication.
mhm.
I say something, but it then twists and you hear it a completely different way. That was never my intention, but I'll be the bigger person and apologize and say, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And in those moments, if you both, and really in addition to that, it's okay, most times than not, or more times than not, rather, in that situation, one side or the other is believing a lie.
Mhm.
And
Mm,
so if you can together work on, okay, well, this is what I'm feeling, but this is the truth. And I
yeah.
can pull the truth from my brain saying, okay, I feel unloved. I feel hopeless. But the truth is, I know you love me. I know. And then you can point out moments in the past when that's happened. That's how you can start to overcome some of those crazy cycles.
And one of the things that I love about what you're saying, and what I often encourage my clients to do, is first of all, remember that underneath all that explosive emotion is a scared kid.
Absolutely.
That inner child is terrified. You're not going to love me, or you're mad at me, or I didn't do it right, or whatever it is. There's a scared kid. So if you can, in your mind or your mind's eye, reframe your partner as a scared child, that can sometimes help to bring up that compassion, that patience, that lovely stuff you were just talking about, Jeff. And that really does shift everything.
No,
I
you said that's the key is, and this is so hard to do in the moment, but you hit the nail on the head, is
mm,
that if you cannot take it personally,
right.
have compassion instead of anger, and realize, okay, my spouse is hurting right now.
Mhm.
It's nothing I did. I tell people all the time, again, more times than not all the time, but generally, when something happens or a spouse gets triggered in an argument
Mhm.
because of what's already been there for so long.
Totally.
It's not something that you did to your spouse. There was an action that triggered that, and
Mhm.
then again, they get upset with you, and then you take it personal in that moment. If you can train yourself to say, okay, I can see my husband or wife is hurting. They're that little scared child that just so desperately wants to be loved. Let me take a step back. How can I be that safe place? Because at the end of the day, we're all in charge of our own, safety banks. Uh,
Mhm.
your wife or spouse is not in charge of your safety bank. Now, whether you make deposits or withdrawals is up to you. And the
Mm.
goal obviously is to make a lot more deposits than withdrawals. But again, to your point, if you can have that compassion to say, wow, they're really hurting. How can I be there to really help them through the hard time? That's a big step.
Yes, and it can shift things almost magically.
Yes.
Jeff, your excuse me, Reset Ministries is a nonprofit, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. About 2 years ago, as the Chargers were making their way up to that place, I think it's LA. I forgot the name of it.
We don't speak its name.
Exactly. I just saw a great need where and it was right before COVID, and even into COVID, but there's just a lot of guys that were in a tough spot. And
Mm.
so Reset was birthed to just be that safe place for guys when they're going through a crisis, or guys that just need a little help along the journey. I started this nonprofit to really give people a resource that they can trust, that, no matter what the situation is, there's hope and help out there for them.
And so cost doesn't deter them, because that's not a factor, right?
Correct. Whenever I'm, so many of these athletes or military SEALs, or even, some of the CEOs that I work with, or just people in general, everybody always wants something from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the great Zig Ziglar, said, everyone has on their forehead, WIIFM, and what's in it for me? Everybody, and most people are like, I'll only do something if there's something in it for me.
Yeah.
And my heart is like, I don't really want anything from you. I just want to help you. I want to help you get to the other side of whatever, situation you're in. So generally when I'm working, and I get, there are people who say, hey, I'll only help you if you pay me. That's great. God bless those people. But for me, it's, I've never really been a guy motivated by money, although I do know the good life costs money, and being in San Diego costs a lot of money.
Yes.
But up to where if I get referred a client, I will never ask for any money up front. I always want to help them get to a healthy place where we can stop medicating and numbing the pain with unhealthy behaviors, addictions, whatever it may be. And then once we get them to a healthy place, we can have a conversation then. But generally, to your point up front, yes, I do not ask for any money up front.
So I love that about you, Jeff. And I love everything that you've shared today. And I want to encourage everybody listening to this show, if you've gained something from what you heard today, go to, let's give them the website.
Yes, it's www.don'texit.org.
Don't exit.
Don't exit. That's just the phrase, because most people, when they're in some kind of chaos or in a rough situation, they want to run from the pain. They want to hit the eject button. But I'm like, look, we're not going to hit the exit button first. So yes, www.don'texit.org.
And donate whatever is in your heart to donate. Help Jeff to continue to do this really important work with a really important part of our population, our warriors, our men, the ones that have the hardest time dealing with their grief and their pain.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here today. Thank you to our listeners and viewers for being with us. And please join us next week when Deputy District Attorney Tracy Pryor here in San Diego will be talking to us about an amazing facility called One Safe Place. Until then,
Paula, and save a man, save a family.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on Change It Up Radio. I hope you found this episode informative and entertaining. If you want to hear past shows, or you want to get information on being a guest or a sponsor of this show, go to changeitupradio.com. We all know that change is inevitable and it's necessary, but darn it, it's also tricky. My goal is to help you make the experience of change smoother and more productive. If you've benefited from this show, please subscribe to it, share it, and review it. That helps me to tune into what you really want to hear and what you really want to learn more about. Remember, you can find us on every major podcast platform and also on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. We look forward to seeing you next week for Change It Up Radio.